Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Tooth Episode 2. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we got introduced to Amy, which is interesting. It seems like Amy's a therapist, and basically it seems like she was just living a very mundane life, as they were kind of describing. She was caged in a mundane life, and then the sick hit. And obviously she stayed in quarantine, so a caged life turned to even more of a caged life. It seems like she was just kind of living her life day by day, just like, oh, I'm kind of caught in other people's BS. Because I think the thing is, like, she's kind of like living life only through other people. Because I was like, right, because she has to basically deal with other people's lives. And I mean, from what we saw, that's all she had. I guess that's what that's supposed to symbolize. Like, her job is kind of all she had. And outside of that life, she didn't really have too much. Until, like, the sick happened. Eventually, she just left, and I guess she saw the sign of, like, these elephants running. It's like, oh, they escaped from the nearby zoo, and I think for her, it's like, I think it inspired her. It's like, if they can escape from their mundane lives, so can she. So we do see her later on going to the zoo, and she releases a bird, and I think it's, you know, obviously a giant metaphor for her kind of spreading her wings. So we do see later on that she is kicking it at the zoo. I'm wondering, is she taking care of the rest of the animals in the zoo, or did she set all of them free? Are they kind of running rampant? Because it is this interesting thing, because obviously you get a little bit with, like, that kind of, like, with Pubba of, like, right, like, let nature kind of run its course to a certain extent. Granted, like I said, it does seem like Pubba was up to some shady stuff, or it was mixed up in some shady stuff. But I think Amy in particular is, like, you know, it's just kind of like no one needs to be caged anymore. This is a different world. This is a different life for me, you know, so... Like I said, whether or not there's other animals there, but she is taking shelter at the zoo and making it her new home. And I guess, you know, this kind of adventure, you know, for the first time in her life, she's kind of adventuring out a little bit. But we do see at the end, a baby gets dropped off, you know, a hybrid. Once again, we don't know the time frame and stuff like that. I'm assuming, like, at this, the 9 years hasn't time skipped yet for that part of Amy. So I think that's something we're going to have to keep in mind. Like, then we're going to do a lot of bouncing around in time frame wise. I don't know if, like, Amy's been there for the 9 years and then because she was in that quarantine before she went to the zoo and kind of made it her own. It's been weeks, probably months. But it hasn't been like that full time skip yet, I don't think. So we're probably going to see her raising this little girl, much like, Gus's, Pubba did the same thing, you know, so. But obviously, we cut back to the big man trying to run away from Gus to the point that he's like, because Gus is like, oh yeah, don't leave stuff behind because that'll let people know where you are. I was like, honestly, that's pretty smart. Like, I was about to say, are you just like not into littering? It's like, oh no, literally, God, I can't say it. Littering in this world will get you killed because it's going to give people a trail to follow. And I love that he's just kind of like, oh, really? And then, like, he throws a water bottle, and then he's, like, pulling out all this junk from his jacket and throwing it just so that Gus will be so preoccupied with that. But we do see that his leg is injured. I'm assuming it's something that happened probably either it's from his previous line of work, as in, like, what he did post-apocalypse-wise after the sick and everything, or whether that's something that happened because of his football career, you know, who knows. But obviously it seems like he has to take pills to kind of mitigate. Like, even at one point he was touching, you can hear the crack and everything. It's kind of interesting because it kind of reminds me a little bit of my own scar. Like, I have like I fractured my ankle. It's called a butterfly fracture. Like, what, 8 years ago? Actually 9 years ago, interestingly enough. Back in 2012. So that's interesting. Regardless, it's not important. I've actually talked about it in the video. You can find it if you want to. But it kind of reminded me of that. But I love that scene just because, like, right, like, you see Gus in the background and his eyes glowing like that. I was like, oh, that actually looks so sick. But what's so interesting, though, is if you actually rewind it, like, a couple seconds, like, even before he notices Gus and you see his glowing green eye, you can actually see Gus sitting in the background. I'm like, that's because I was so focused on Tommy, I didn't even notice him the first time, and then you rewind it a little bit, you're like, oh, there he is, he's right there. But that is kind of a cool little detail. Like, I think deer's eyes naturally do that, just with, like, the reflection of light and night and stuff like that. But, I mean, I guess it's just kind of like, you know, it's that thing that just kind of helps them see at night type of thing. So, but obviously he's asking him all these questions and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, you're going to take me? He's like, no, why not? Because I have something to do. It's like, what's that? And, you know, it's just like, you know, he being the inquisitive kid that he is, and he's just like, leave me alone, I'm going to go to sleep, you finish your food, so when I wake up, you're gone. And he looks at Tommy's bag. I actually thought that next scene was so adorable. The fact is that, like, he ate all of Tommy's food and he's passed out with a map on top of his face. I was like, I guess it's supposed to be the kid version of, like, oh my god, I went on a eating binge and kind of sugar rush, and I ended up, like, collapsing. The itis kicked in, I guess, if you want to say. I never knew that was a thing until the Boondocks. Even that term, the itis. But I loved it. I was like, I guess it's almost like it was just like the kid version of like someone going on a bender and just like drinking and losing their mind. Just like, oh my god, having a kid version of a hangover. That was incredible. And it's just like, he's like, where's my pills? He's like, I tried them, but like they were nasty. It's like, they weren't candy. He's like, well, here's one. It's like, oh, we gotta find food. But then, like, Gus is like, I can take you somewhere. And it's like, yeah, I got, he can. So it does seem like it is kind of what I thought. He does have enhanced senses. Plus, I'm sure, once again, like, even his hearing, I'm sure it's sensitive because he hasn't heard a lot of sounds. But I think it is just he naturally has heightened senses. Just, like, I think just the natural animalistic sides of him. But I love that, like, Tommy has him go and check out that place. He's like, maybe we should go together. And Tommy's just waving, like, no. Go in, get in there. And he's going there and they're just trying to get some stuff, gets captured by the family, and they're like, wait, what? What's going on here? So they're all sitting down at dinner. They're both shoveling food in their mouths, and it's like, you don't need the mask. Have you been around other people? No. It's like, yes, the sick is around, and it comes and goes, which is interesting. That's what I think that's so fascinating. Maybe the argument could be like viruses are kind of always out there, and they come and go in a sense of, with the proper precautions and stuff like that, you can like prevent them and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like the terminology come and go I find so fascinating. So it's like you haven't been around people, I haven't been around, like, obviously if I had the sick like pinky thing, I guess because it happens so rapidly that it's like if I was sick, you'd be seeing the pinky. That's the clear sign of it. But I thought that was so fascinating. And they brought up something interesting too. They're like, wait, he can talk? It's like, for them, they're confused about that. But then also it's like, how old are you, Cus? And he's like 10. And like, do they normally live that long? I'm like, that's so interesting. So I guess like because of their hybridness, like they don't have long life expectancies. Or is that supposed to represent, that's because I asked those questions before. It's like, yeah, most hybrids, they're making it seem like they don't ever learn human language. Two, it doesn't seem like they live long. Now, whether that's just because they're hunted down and killed before them because people don't let them get too big. Because it might be a thing of if they grow too old, that maybe what they're used for, which we kind of learn about we'll learn about more in this episode. Maybe if they reach a certain age, it might be a messed up thing where it's like if they reach puberty, that's an issue. So they're mostly hunted before they get to that point. Or maybe, like I said, it's just natural biology where they just, like, their bodies aren't, like, adjusted to this world. So they just, sadly, their bodies just kind of give out before they reach that certain age. I don't know. But obviously I love the whole thing of like, wait, oh, can I go play with, it's like, oh, like, you're his mom? And it's like, yeah, and points out like, oh, I'm looking for my mom. Do you know her? And it's like, oh, so, how do you meet or whatever? And it's just like, we didn't. And it's just like him being like, oh, he's taking me to Colorado. And then just Tommy looking at him like he's so annoyed. I do like that dynamic between them. Like, I know it's a dynamic you've seen time and time again, like the reluctant guardian, but still, I like it in this particular case too, because I think it adds an element to the fact is because he's so young. It's a little different from like a Joel and Ellie because, yeah, Ellie's a little naive in the wonders of the world because she's 14 and she grew, literally, this is the only world she's ever known. If you're unaware of what I'm talking about, referencing The Last of Us, it's the only world post like the 20-year time skip when the virus and the infection spread and stuff like that. So that's the only world she's ever known, kind of like Gus. But Gus's worldview is even smaller than that because his Papa only let him see some of the world. And obviously throughout this episode, he's learning more and more of like, right, things are... Because he had asked Tommy early in the episode, he's like, did you put out all the fires? He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, my Papa said that the world was on, there were fires everywhere, but the only fire I've seen is this one. So just because his Papa kind of made him scared of the world. That's why I was wondering, like, was it a metaphorical or literal? I think it's metaphorical that the world was on fire, but he made it sound more literal because he was trying to scare Gus so that Gus would never want to leave, the comforts of home. And it's like, that's the sad thing because he didn't prepare Gus for the eventuality that maybe I wouldn't be around, but maybe he thought I have more time, maybe Gus will get older. and he was probably hoping, like, if I could just make him so terrified of the world, even if he gets older, he'll stop asking questions. But kids are inquisitive. They're going to want to know about the world, and you can't keep them sheltered. The more you try and keep them away from something, the more they want to go towards it, as we saw last episode. But regardless, I thought it was kind of this cute moment between Rusty and him. It's like, oh, scratching Rusty. Like, really quickly, like, Bev was like, oh, does he bite? He's like, I don't know. And he looks at Gus, do you bite? And he was like, no. It's like, there you go. And it's like, he goes off and plays with Rusty, but Rusty, like, scratches his ear, because he was, like, talking about a dog he had, Snickers, that, you scratch his ear, his leg would kick, and he does it, and Gus does the same thing, too. And Bev is looking, and it's like, honestly, for her, it's, like, the cutest thing, because she had talked about it, that, Rusty is the last regular human child, because everyone else subsequently, he is 11, so he was born on that cusp, because every other child that was born a hybrid. And it seemed like probably even to this day, any child born is going to be born a hybrid, just because of the virus. It does something to, because it's interesting, because I guess it affects the DNA of something not born yet. I mean, I don't know. It's so interesting, because it's like, why hasn't it manifested in a way where it's like humans turning, like, even full-grown adults turn into something, but they don't. Like, only the kids being born do. Because I guess it's like, it has to be something written in the DNA that gets overwritten by the virus or something like that. I don't know. But I thought it was so cute when they're playing, like, Gus is blindfolded and he hears everything. And I love that Rusty's like, no fair, Mom, he hears everything. Well, he's not like you, Rusty. You got to find a game that you're both good at. I'm like, it's actually a really adorable moment. Obviously, you have George realizing who Tommy is. He's like, yo, like, oh my God, you were at the Guardians and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, I mean, he's like, what do you want? He's like, we're gonna stay here, like, till the storm passes. He's like, yeah, I gotta talk to Bev. He's like, oh, I'm not asking. He's like, hey, man, me and my family, we don't want any trouble. He's like, that makes two of us. It's like, oh, you have to be so imposing. But, at one point, Bev ends up seeing the scars on him, and I'm guessing the people that come after Gus later in the episode, maybe he used to be one of them. Like, the fact is that he even talked about it last episode of, like, oh, I can turn you in. It's like, he left those days behind, maybe to a certain extent. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe it's not related to this. I think it does. I think being around Gus reminds him of all the terrible things that he's done. Whether it is just killing regular people, or whether it is, like, being responsible for kids like him. Because it's like, she brings up later on, like, Bev brings up, like, oh yeah, hurting people, kidnapping, killing. So, kidnapping must mean, like, the kids and stuff like that. So, also, Gus is hearing music for the first time, and he's dancing and feeling and vibing. But obviously what's interesting too is, like, he's like, oh my God, like, that book you have, Rusty, my dad has one too. But then, like, I guess his dad, like, had read that book when he was either, that book has to have some significance, because he chose that specific book. Like, either Gus had a version of that book when he was born, but he doesn't have it with that, his papa didn't have it with him anymore, so he had to recreate it. But it's like, I think it's so interesting he specifically chose that book. And the fact is, the way Gus was looking at it, I think his papa was trying to, like, either remember it from memory, or he chose a specific book and he rewrote it. So it's like, no, I'm taking out all maybe, like, the sad or scary parts of it. I mean, it's a children's book, but still, there might be certain aspects he removed, so it's kind of like he's, taking away Gus's opportunity to kind of learn more about the world. So, I don't know. But that's what it definitely seemed like that was kind of the angle they were kind of implying, because he was looking, and then he immediately asked Rusty about, like, the world being on fire, and it's like, and it, once again, kind of seeing, like, his papa, like, how much of what my papa actually told me was true. Like, he kind of lied about a lot of the outside world, didn't he? And obviously seeing Rusty, and Bev, and it's just like wanting that for himself, a mom like that to tuck him in. I love the whole thing of, like, the lights go out and it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And George being like, that's creepy. Like, the whole thing with his eyes and everything. So, because I thought it was just going to be Bev, but even George started kind of warming up to, Gus. But obviously Bev and Tommy talked, and it's like, yeah, I am trying to get rid of the kid, but it's easier said than done. He's like, but you take care of him. Yeah, I saved his life, but you you can take care of him, because for him it's like it's better off that he stays here with you than be out there. Because for Tommy, he talks about the fact is I did what I needed to survive. It's like, you know, oh, you've never had to kidnap or hurt people because people like you hired me to do the dirty work, you know. So he was kind of a hired gun type of situation. So, but also I think their family's very fortunate to be in a position where like no one knows where they were, so they've never had to cross that line. Doesn't mean they won't have to eventually in this world. You know, that's always a question of like, how long can you hold on to your humanity? How long can you go without doing things that, you know, go against every aspect of who you believe, you know? And that's an interesting thing, because that plays into the Dr. Singh side of things, which, let's finish up like Gus and Tommy's side of things first before we focus on Dr. Singh's. But obviously, as you know, those people find their way there, and obviously Gus like hears Tommy about to leave. He says, "Hey, big man, like I couldn't sleep either. Are we leaving?" And he immediately realizes, like, "Oh, you're leaving without me." But then those guys show up, and it's like Gus can hear them, but he can't smell them because of the rain. It's interfering. So Gus is kind of hiding. Obviously, Bev and George and Rusty, it's like, you know, and even in that moment, it's like, Gus, come over here, like, we'll protect you, we'll look after you. But obviously they're like, we have the right to come into your house because we believe you're harboring an animal kid. The fact of the matter is, we'll come in, you know, so, because they were following the trail. That's so interesting that they're specifically following, I mean, I think they're following anyone, but Gus in particular. Like, I guess Home Dude managed to like give a sign. I mean, he did tag the place, so they do know that Gus is there. So the pink ribbons and everything, like maybe his pub tried to get rid of them, but maybe more got, or maybe Home Dude had already signaled his people before his pub had dealt with him, you know. So I think these are those guys. But then we have like Tommy. Like, obviously, he has limited ammo. He only has 2 bullets left, so it's like, right, your good old apocalypse situation of such limited ammo. But the fact of the matter is, he goes outside, kicking ass, taking names. But the other dude sneaks in there, and obviously, you know, you got your boy Gus slingshotting. I'm curious to see what that eventually turns, because I think at some point he's going to get like something more than a rock or something. I think he's going to get something good and use with the slingshot. Cause I was about to say something else reminds me of the slingshot, but it's Stranger Things is kind of in that same vein. So that's what I think what kind of immediately pops in my mind. I think I also think of like what's her name, Zhao from the video game Dark Cloud. Never played the video game, that won't mean anything to you, but like she's also my go-to when I think about slingshots. But nevertheless, what was really interesting though is like when Gus was like arming himself and the guy's coming after him, and he sees, and there's a deer behind him, which I'm like, whoa, we going a little Princess Mononoke here? Like, it's like, is Gus kind of got that thing going on? But then immediately like Tommy came and ended up dispatching the guy, had the bear trap and everything clamped onto his head. I was like, oh, because this isn't that show. Once again, because I was under the impression, just because of conversations, it made it seem like the comic book is darker, so they probably pulled a little bit away from that. I don't know. Maybe like the comic book's exactly that way tonally, that it doesn't show you, it's just implied. But it's like, whoa, that's brutal. Like, that could have been like, if this were any other show, that would have been something where you got to see it and it was like, would have been brutal. I'm fine with them kind of not deciding not to cut away from it. It's still like the implication of it and just his body dropping, like, oh, that's brutal. And just Gus being like, whoa, you know. But like the deer, like when that was happening, the deer kind of backed away. So I guess it came and responded. Like, I wondered, like, do the hybrids have the power to kind of like, and maybe it's Gus in particular, but maybe all the hybrids, maybe they can call out to the animals they're connected to. Like in his mind, like maybe he resonates with the deers. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like like I referenced the Princess Mononoke, like the deer. Like maybe it's like a forest spirit and it came and responded to like, you know, Gus. But maybe they all like almost like very Snow White-ish, that maybe they respond to like their will or their struggles. But just that was such an interesting thing, like I said. But it just kind of backed away and disappeared into the mist. So obviously, they're packing up all their stuff and leaving. George is like, I mean, he's a great kid and everything. It's just, I got to look after my family, which, you know, Tommy doesn't criticize him or anything. He's like, you do what you got to do to survive. So, and then, like, you know, Rusty and Gus, he's like, yeah, I'm sorry for calling you weird. He's like, yeah, sorry for all the dead people. It's cool. It's okay. You know, and they hug. He gave him the jacket and everything. I was like, that was super sweet. And they hug it out. I was like, oh. He has a friend. The first time he's ever had I guess the closest thing he's had is Tommy, but a friend his own age, like, you know. So you're kind of like, you're hoping that nothing bad happens to that family. I hope we don't find out later on it's like, yeah, George is the only one that survived because his wife and his son died. I hope we don't get post-apocalyptic stuff can do that to you. Like The Walking Dead does that to you, Van Helsing does that to you. Like, you're like, oh, here's this character like, oh, cool. All the kids you were looking after are gone. That's awesome. You know? And it's like, oh, here's this character who popped up later. Yeah, I lost everything. Like, we could have like spoilers, but I mean, it's been years. We could definitely have a Morgan situation on our hands. Like, that's where I'm kind of wondering, in certain regards, of The Walking Dead in that regard. Or hell, even a Rick situation, jeez. That's kind of a more recent spoiler, but it's still. I mean, I say more recent, but it's about, 2 to 3 years, so, come on. But, yeah. But, Gus is like, it's okay if you don't want to go with me, as they kind of take the, God, I can't think of the damn thing's name, of the cart, or whatever they're taking down. But he's like, I'll take you to the next town, and then we're done. He's like, then off to Red Rock, and he's like, stop, don't push your luck, because Bev kind of mentioned Red Rock, the RR Colorado up there, because it's like somewhere her and George would go to listen to music. So it's like, you're really into music, and so maybe your mom was too. So gives him at least somewhere to start. But I think, you know, obviously that icy heart of Tommy's is slowly melting away, and he's, you know, he went above and beyond to protect the kid, even though he did. He could have easily just walked away, but he chose to stick around. He chose to save Gus again, you know, so. So there's that side of things. And then let's circle to Dr. Singh's situation. Like, seeing, like, his wife, Ronnie's still okay. I was like, oh, and it doesn't seem like she's sick. Like, did it pass or something? But it's like, no, he's got serums to kind of protect her. Which, I didn't talk about it earlier. I did get an answer to a question I had in episode 1. I was wondering whether or not hybrids could get sick. Turns out they can't. Not only can they not get sick, they also can't spread the sick as well. So that's really an interesting detail. He's like, I don't know, because I think it's still a rumor, and that's why hybrids are kind of looked down upon, because they're blamed for it. It's like, no, they can't contract it, nor can they spread it. I'm sure that still doesn't make people think, like, well, they're the lucky ones, but the fact of the matter is there's still the calls, like, but it seems like Tommy was kind of implying, like, that's very antiquated thinking, that they're responsible for anything, because they can't contract the virus, nor can they spread it. We humans are the only ones spreading it to each other, so we're kind of our own damnation. Once again, I think this whole thing is man-made. They're making it seem like it might be nature. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a combination of nature going wild, or nature trying to respond to humans stepping into territory they shouldn't. Once again, just basing that off of some stuff of like what we know so far, plus, you know, some stuff from the trailer makes me kind of think that, but we'll find out. But Dr. Singh is, you know, running out of medicine for his wife, so it does seem like the world is forming some form of normalcy again, because it's like he's living in basically looks like a neighborhood, a cul-de-sac again. I think that's just probably their original house, and just kind of like, I think maybe it's just like, okay, those are like the military like quarantine zones and stuff like that. So he goes to a restaurant, which is now kind of a doctor's office, and so they have scans and be like, oh, are you sick or anything? And he's like, nah. Yeah, Kevin, he went out west. He's like, I didn't know there was a West Coast anymore. It's like, but Kevin was just kind of getting cabin fever, being locked up here the entire time. So, but he meets with the Dr. Gladys, and Gladys I thought was really interesting, because Gladys was like, yeah, we're so focused on the sick, that became our top priority, that we didn't think. She's like, yeah, mammograms, like, we used to kind of, you know, have people check them, because like obviously, you know, it's almost like a luxury being worried about something that will slowly kill you over time, whereas the sick immediately kills you. Because it turns out Gladys has cancer, you know, and now she's leaving all her research to Dr. Singh, because it's like, you have to continue my work, which it seems like he's like, you know why I walked away from all of this. He's like, I can't do what's kind of necessary. So that immediately, we didn't get any full answers, but that immediately made me go, especially at one point, it's like some of those guys show up and they drop off a thing. It's like, cool, thanks. And they walk away, and Singh kind of start getting uncomfortable. I'm like, it's what I think it is. The hybrids are the cure. They're like, whether it's bone marrow, whatever it is, something from them. And I made a reference to, like, once again, kind of spoilers, The Last of Us, like Ellie being the cure. it seems like we were definitely going down that route of like the hybrids potentially being the cure for, but it's like, yeah, a lot of them have to be killed, dissected, have something from glands from them specifically being extracted, something in their DNA can fight it back. So obviously Gladys is taking notes on what's worked with Rainey, what hasn't, and she wants Dr. Singh to continue to work, but it's like, I don't want to do that. Like for Gladys, it's like, I've done things I'm not proud of, but it's like the fact of the matter is trying to fight this cure. I thought it was my purpose to find a cure for, fight this disease, this virus. I thought it was my purpose to find a cure for it, but I think it's yours. And he's like, how can you be so sure? And she's like, because you'll do anything to save your wife, you know? And so he comes back home and he's like, honestly, making this cure, like being responsible for it, for him, it's like, it goes against everything we believe. And Rainey reads it and it's like, oh my God, she's horrified by it. So I think it's like finding out, like, especially because she's been taking the cure the entire time. It's like, wait, this is what's been going into my cure, all this. It's like, you know, it starts, you know, is it for the greater good, you know? The terrible things you have to do for the greater good because you'll be helping save the world, but at what cost? And it seems like that's going to be something Dr. Singh's going to have to decide upon, but it's like, it's not something he wants to do. He doesn't think he can, but it might be a situation where he's forced to. Because he's also hiding his wife's sickness, because even if he has a cure to mitigate it, I mean, first and foremost, if people find out, wait, you have a cure, you've been hoarding it for yourself, it's going to turn into that, I'm sure. But also the moment, even before that, people find out she's sick, now we got to get rid of her, burn her body or something like that, because we can't have that infection. So it's like, we can't let anyone in the neighborhood see you this certain way. So they've got the limited supply of cures they have. Basically, they run her about a month, about 28 days specifically. Yeah, there's some side effects, but mainly it's good. But it's like, so there's like, Gladys is going, like, I guess she like left because it's like, right, I've only got this amount of time left, so I'm going to do something else with it. I don't know. Not unless she went off and just, you know, killed herself because she didn't have much time left. Passing this on to Singh was like the last thing she needed to do. So rather than wait for the cancer to eat her, maybe she found another way out. You know, they didn't really cover that. So all he says is she's gone. So it could have just been like she left to just live whatever life she has left, or you know. But that's a heavy thing, and like I said, it does seem like it is confirming like what all this hunting is about. They're gathering up because we had because earlier in the episode, Tommy was going to pay Beth for like some of the food they took, and it's like, yeah, you can exchange just for like MRE tokens. It's basically like you can exchange just at like a military post or whatever for like rations or whatever, military rations. So they do get paid to bring in, like they are being paid to hunt the hybrids, so it seems like that's what they're kind of setting up. So, but and like I said, I do believe it is for cure. Like I said, what specifically they're taking from the hybrids that is necessary for the cure, who knows? And like I said, whether or not this is the reason why many of them don't live, because they're taken before a certain age. Like I said, maybe there's something in them because before they hit puberty, that means they have to that allows them to be a necessary ingredient for the cure, or just simply like I brought up earlier, it could just simply be, hey, their bodies just don't live long just because of their whole being a hybrid and everything. Once again, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.